When I get into the meat of this podcast episode, I think some of you are going to go, well, no shit, right? Like, duh. And if that's the case, then like, I'm sorry for wasting your time. and I apologize for the 20 minutes that I consumed from your life, but this was not an easy lesson for me to learn. And I'm hoping that by sharing what I'm going to share today, I help one person avoid some of the same shit that I experienced in this world, in this dimension, right? In this place, in this thing that I'm going to share with you today. And if I help one person with this, then this world becomes a more loving place. And that is the overall mission of Inner Wealth Global, is to make this world a more loving place. And you can find that on the mission on my website, www.innerwealthglobal.com. You can go to the About page and you can see that is the published mission of the website of our company, of Inner Wealth Global. And if one person is able to make a shift with this concept, make a shift earlier because of this concept, then the fact that I went through this is purposeful, it's meaningful. And I think that's really, we all experience stress and struggle and pain during the course of our life. The only time that stress, struggle, and strain are for nothing is if they don't benefit society in some way. So if there's one person that resolves this issue or transcends this issue or heals from this issue faster than I did, then all of my pain will have paid off. And that's all I want, is for the pain that I experienced to be meaningful and valuable to the world at large. And that's how we make the world a more loving place. I'm going to tell you a story. Go back to 2016, where this journey for me really starts. Talk about March of 2016 a lot in the course of my life, because it was a transitional, transformational timeline or time in my life. And what had happened, what had transpired is I started in corporate America. I was in the United States Marine Corps from 1992 to 1997, between two Gulf Wars. So I'm not a combat vet. But I got out of the Marine Corps in 1997, and I immediately went to work for corporate America. And when I told an uncle, I told my mother and my father and my family, my closest family, the salary that I wanted in corporate. And, at the time in 1997, I said I got out of the Marine Corps and I wanted to make $30,000. That was my ambition, $30,000. And at the time, I grew up in a blue collar family. So my whole family was, blue collar workers and non-educated. I was the first college grad, and that didn't happen until 1999. But, I was the first college educated person in my family, and on one side of my family. The other side of my family is very educated, but the people that I spent the most time with, I was the most educated of them all. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I said I wanted to make $30,000 a year. And an uncle of mine literally said, there's no way he's going to get $30,000 a year. And he said, I'm only making, and he said like 24 as an uncle. And not educated. But anyway, so I went on my job interview and I got my job, or I got the job, and they met my salary request, $30,000. They hit my salary request. And I look back and see, after I got into executive leadership and management, I see that, it wasn't a big ask. In fact, if I would have asked for more, they would have matched it. I just thought $30,000 was a lot, because I didn't believe in myself very much. I didn't believe in myself, and I didn't believe I was very worthy, and I didn't feel like I was very valuable. But I just went in and asked for what I thought, they would negotiate lower, and they actually met it. So I just didn't think a whole lot of myself. And that was the start of, not thinking of myself a lot. Well, it wasn't a start, but it definitely one of the, prime example. But anyway, moved along the ladder of success pretty quickly and got moved all the way from Silver Spring, our field office in Germantown or Gaithersburg, Maryland. My wife and I lived in Germantown, Maryland, but we moved all the way across the country. They were closing our location down, and 3 of us got invited to move, and they moved us 3,000 miles away to Portland, Oregon, right outside of Portland, Oregon, little town called we lived in a little town called Hillsboro, and it's a great place to raise kids. Rainy and cloudy and 55 degrees, rainy and 55 all the time. So most likely, if you want to know what the weather is in Portland, Oregon today, it's probably 55 and rainy. And it seems like that's the weather 9 months, 9 months out of the year. I love you, Portland, but holy cow, the rain was a lot. Anyway, started ascending the ladder of success out there, and they funded my MBA, and they funded, I was on the list of high potential people in the company, and they put me on an accelerated track, paid for my MBA, started training me. I had weekly calls monthly calls with HR just to check in to make sure that I was on the right track and that I was being groomed and I was being trained properly for a track in leadership. And I got a recruitment knock from a company that was looking for someone to run their plant, their manufacturing plant. And I interviewed and I said yes. And I assumed the position, immediately had some success, took care. I had a leadership team that I let a few go. I hired a few and built an awesome leadership team. I would put that leadership team up against any leadership team in the world. That there's nothing that team couldn't solve. No problem that we couldn't face and conquer. It was awesome. It was just a great time. And what happened was I was there for about 3 years, and it was like I had some success. I had a lot of success. And I said, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here, because when they find out that I'm really not that good, like, they're going to fire me. And when they find out that my team are the ones doing all the work and they're going to fire me, I got to get out of here. And I wrote a book about that called The Imposter in Charge. And in my first book. And like, there was always this voice, always these thoughts in my mind, and always these stories going on that I wasn't valuable and I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't worthy, and I didn't deserve, accomplishment. I mean, that I wasn't, like, I was tricking everybody. There was always this feeling that I was just tricking everybody. And then I would get promoted, and then I was tricking people at that level, and then I would get promoted. And it was just crazy. It was like always I dismissed any possibility that I was good at my job and I was a good leader. I dismissed all possibility. And I could develop people and I could develop teams at a world-class level. And I didn't realize how valuable that was. It was so easy and effortless for me. I just thought I thought anybody could do it, because I thought so little of myself that if I could do it, anybody could do it. And that's literally how I saw my talents, my God-given innate talents that were never really trained or taught, or I knew how to develop people, and I know how to develop teams at a world-class level. And then we would accelerate. So I was there for 3 years, and then I got recruited to come to the Midwest, and I was leading a rather large organization, $350 million organization. And again, as soon as I got installed as a leader, operations leader, I was like, man, I got to get out of here, because I got a 3 year window, and they're going to find out that I'm not that good. And then I got to get out of here. And I started like planning for an escape, like as soon as I touched down, as soon as I sat in a chair, and I just had all of this insecurity, inadequacy, and insignificance inside of me that that I just wasn't good, and that I added no value. And I was tricking people to keep, getting these jobs and getting huge. I thought were huge paydays, and great benefit packages and great bonus structures. I mean, I just kept tricking people to get them, and I didn't realize I was talented. I wouldn't acknowledge it. I wouldn't face it. I wouldn't accept it. It felt like a lie to me if I ever thought that I was talented or worthy or deserving or even like good in any way, shape, or form. It all just seemed like a lie. Well, I put myself on a 3-year window and I didn't make it. I made it about 20 months. I made it 20 months. Yeah, 20 months. So from January of 2013 to August of 2014. So 20 months. And then I got fired because I was upside down and my home life was abusive, and everything in my house, my relationship with my wife was physically, mentally, emotionally abusive. I wasn't at that time. I loved my kids a lot. I loved my kids hard. I loved my kids infinitely, but I was a very abusive parent in terms of there was a lot of control and manipulation and anger, threats, and guilt and shame and blame. I mean, that's how I parented. You'll commonly hear me use those 5 words together: guilt and shame, anger, threats, and blame. These are all weak tactics. These are the signs of a weak leader when they use guilt and shame, anger, threats, and blame. This is a sign of absolute weakness. Only weak leaders, only weak people need to use guilt and shame and anger, threats, and blame. It literally is internal weakness being expressed in the world. Threats and guilt and shame, anger, threats, and blame, right? So that's the way I parented. And it wasn't a very loving. It was all about me. As long as my kids did what I said, honored me the way I wanted to be honored, respected me the way I wanted to be respected, did what I told them, checked all the boxes, met all the conditions, then I would issue love. Like, it was a very narcissistic way of parenting. I did love my kids hard, and we had a lot of laughs. We had a lot of good times. I just wasn't a very reciprocating, loving parent unconditionally. There were a lot of conditions applied for the issuance of love in my parenting. Same thing in my marriage. And in August of 2014, everything fell apart, and I got a 5-month severance. It was very, very awesome. It was a great severance, and my wife and I we went to town, and for 5 months we drank ourselves to death. We were at happy hour every day. I would go on Indeed for a few hours a day. I fill out a couple applications. Maybe I went on a job interview every once in a while, but in 5 months I had a job again, and I was the GM of a manufacturing plant in the chief seat, and I was, again, as soon as I sat down, I was like, okay, I got a 3-year window. I got to get out of here. Like, how am I going to escape? I'm going to succeed in this role, and then I'm going to escape, and it's going to put me back on a successful trajectory. Well, didn't make it, because the home life continued to devolve. My ability to show up for myself and my wife and my family. I was 300 pounds. I was suicidal. I was drinking at toxic levels on a regular basis. And I just couldn't lead myself. I couldn't lead my family. I couldn't lead the business. So I got fired again. And that was in March of 2016. And that's when this journey started. Now, I tried to get back into corporate. I went on 4 or 5 job interviews, and I finished runner up every time. And I was pissed that I couldn't get another job. But at that point, the gig was up. My resume was Swiss cheese, and there was no turning back. I couldn't get back to what I knew. I needed to do something completely different. And the only thing I ever loved in the world, in my corporate gigs, with developing people and developing teams, it's the only thing I ever enjoyed. All the rest of it, I thought I had to be able to do those 2 things. I saw this speaker speak one time, and he said something that I thought was preposterously beautiful at the time. And I thought it was an impossibility. But he said these words. He said, I'll never do another thing that I hate the rest of my life. I'll only do things that I love. And I was like, holy crap, is that even possible? And I didn't believe it back then because I thought life was about sacrifice. I thought life was about pain. I thought life was about doing a lot of shit that I hated. Thought life was about being miserable all the time. I mean, for whatever reason, these were the stories that were in my head. These were the stories. These were the thoughts. These were the beliefs that I held, that life was hard, that you needed to struggle, that stress was all there was, that you needed to be pushing a rock uphill all the time or else you were lazy. Like that if you were lifting weights and you were enjoying it, then you were doing it wrong. If you were running and you could still breathe, you weren't running fast enough. I literally thought life was about self-punishment, self-abuse, like a bit inflicting conflict, inflicting chaos, inflicting pain on yourself purposefully, intentionally. That's what I thought life was. That if you were enjoying life, you weren't doing it right. I don't remember anybody specifically teaching me that lesson, but I do remember every aspect of my childhood being difficult. And maybe that's where it came from, that I never saw that life could be easy from anybody in my life. Like everybody was in a state of chaos, drama and chaos and conflict and fighting and aggression and violence and fights breaking out in my house and brothers, fists flying. I mean, I saw this shit all the time. It was crazy. It's like I believe that the world was violent, and the absence of violence meant that something was wrong. And this guy had the audacity to say, I'll never do something that I hate ever again, thinking, you know what? If I could get there, that would be awesome, but I don't think that's possible. And when I set out to build this current life, and I started working out, and I started exercising, and I started dieting, and I started running, and I started hydrating, and I started eating healthy nutrition, and I started meditating, and I started journaling, and I stopped picking fights with my wife and my kids, and I stopped allowing abuse into my life, and I stopped all the madness. I started reading awesome books, and I started listening to awesome audio files on YouTube, and literally I would consume any new wisdom or any new content that I possibly could. It's like my life started shifting radically. But there's one thing that I struggled to let go of, and that's the way I thought of myself. And look, 18 minutes in, I finally got to the topic of what this is about. It's the gravitational pull of familiar thought. I felt obligated to think the way I always had, specifically about myself. I felt obligated to always think the thoughts that I always thought. Back then, 2016, felt obligated to feel worthless, to feel valueless, to feel inadequate, to feel insecure. And there were stories running around in my head. And whenever I would recognize that painful story in my head, and I would try to think a different thought, it felt like I was lying to myself. Literally, it felt like it was just a lie. How could I possibly think that? It's a lie. I am worthless. That's what I thought. And when I would try to think, and I was doing some guided meditations where they would say, I am, or affirmations, I am worthy. And I was like, it's a fucking lie. I am not worthy. I am not worth anything. I am worthless. That there were voices in my head that were screaming, trying to hold on to the old way of thinking and the old way of feeling. And there was definitely, it felt like an obligation to be who I had always been. And over time, the feeling, I guess the guilt and the shame that I felt from trying to think differently or feeling differently, over time, that guilt and shame shifted. And that uncomfortable feeling that I got, that voice that said, it's a lie, like when I thought I am talented, that voice that would scream, it's a lie, started to get quiet. And over time, like, I didn't have any problem saying I am talented, but I didn't feel talented. I didn't hold any resistance to thinking that I was talented, but I didn't feel talented. And if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you hear me say, when the mind and the heart are connected, that's your truth. So when you think you're talented, but you don't feel talented, you're not, your operating system isn't designed to feel talented, to be talented. You're just thinking it. It's just a thought. It's not true for you, because you feel truth in your heart. You don't know truth. You feel truth. You feel what's true for you. You don't think what's true for you. If you think it, but you don't feel it, you got some work to do. You're not embodying that belief yet. The first step was eliminating the mental resistance that came from thinking that I was worthless to thinking that I was talented. There was mental resistance there. And then when that mental resistance went away, I could think I am worthy, and like without mental resistance or without this scream of, you're lying. And then it took me a while to realize that I could actually feel these things too. Then I started practicing feeling talented. And I would sit with my eyes closed and I would think about things that I had done in my past that required talent, and then start to feel talented. And I could literally feel talented in my body, and I could feel my body start to light up. I could feel the positive energy move in my body. And then when I would stop thinking about it, the energy would stop. And then the next day when I would do it again, it got a little easier and a little easier and a little easier. And it took years, but I eventually got to the point where I feel talented. I literally feel talented, and I feel worthy, and I feel deserving, and I feel significant, and I feel like I matter, and I feel like I make a difference, and I feel like I have something to provide the world, and I feel like I make a difference, and I feel like the world is a better place because I am here. And if I go back 7 years ago, I felt broken. I felt insecure, inadequate, insignificant. I felt like I thought like, and I felt like I was a worthless piece of shit. And now I feel like this world is a better place because I'm here. And it's not because of the impact that I make. It's because the fact that I've allowed myself to think that thought and feel the truth of that thought. And now I'm embodying that thought and that feeling and that new belief. And the world is showing me evidence, real-time evidence of how it's true. Look, at the beginning I said, if this episode breaks through to one person, that it would be beneficial. And all I'm asking you is, do you feel like there's something wrong with you? Do you feel like you don't matter? Do you feel like you have nothing to offer? Do you feel like there's something wrong with you? Do you feel defective? Do you feel like you're just taking up space? Do you feel like you can't serve humanity? Do you feel like you can't build a business? Do you feel like you can't become wealthy? Do you feel like success is elusive to you and you can't become successful? Do you feel like you can't anything? if you feel that, the first step is to allow yourself, give yourself full permission to think and feel something different than you have thought and felt up to this point. That's the very first step. Give yourself permission to think and feel differently. And when you give yourself permission to think and feel differently than you have up to this point, because no one's requiring you to think and feel anything less than awesome about yourself. Please understand that. You are under no obligation to anyone to think and feel less than freaking completely the most valuable person on the face of the planet, just like everybody else. Nobody is making you think bad shit about yourself. Nobody is making you feel less than awesome. And this is on you. It's up to you to think and feel at a higher level. No one can do this for you. And you are under no obligation to think and feel anything less than freaking spectacular. The first step is to give yourself permission to think and feel differently than you ever have up to this point. The second step is to begin the process of closing that psychological gap in your mind that when you say, I am whatever it is, talented, worthy, deserving, significant, adequate, secure, whatever it is, that psychological, that resistance, that psychological gap starts to close until the resistance is gone and you easily think, I am awesome, or I am wealthy, or I am significant, I am spectacular. Whatever it is that you want to become, you must think it first. Even without money, no one's making you think and feel broke when you have no money. And the faster you think and feel wealthy, the faster you'll attract wealth into your life. No one's making you think and feel broke. No one's making you think or feel lonely. No one's making you think or feel like a failure. No one is making you think and feel anything less than amazing. You're doing it on your own. You must own that. Victim thinking is not going to get you out of this mess. So the second step is to start reducing that mental resistance, that mental resistance, that refusal of your mind to acknowledge that the new thought is okay. And when that resistance is gone, bring that feeling of that thought into your body. And when you practice this, when you practice thinking new thoughts and feeling new emotions, the emotions that you ultimately want to feel, peace, joy, love, prosperity, health, wealth, success, whatever you want to feel, because the things you want in life, whatever you want, if you want the money, if you want the success, if you want the relationship, there's a feeling, there's an emotional payoff that you're looking to get out of it. Allow yourself to think that thought and feel that emotion right now, and you'll attract it into your life faster. I promise. This is an inside-out world. Change the inside, and the world says, your wish is my command, and it starts to bring that thing to you. But first, you need to give yourself permission. You need to close the mental resistance. Then you need to allow it into your heart. And when you allow it into your heart and you start to embody the feelings like you are already there, that's when you'll see it in your life. Guys, the thing that I struggled with for so long is giving myself permission to think and feel what I wanted to think and feel instead of what I didn't. And that was a barrier for me. That was a real barrier. And maybe it is for you too. Maybe that barrier is in a relationship. Maybe that barrier is in your health. Maybe that barrier is in success. Maybe that barrier is just financial. But whatever it is, like, allow that wall that you've put up, allow it to collapse, and start collapsing it by thinking that thought and feeling that emotion that you want to feel, instead of continuing to allow yourself to think and feel what you don't want to feel. if you continue to think and feel what you don't want, you will continue to attract what you don't want into your life. When you start to think and feel what you do want, you'll start to attract that in your life. It really is that simple. But it takes closing your eyes, sitting in like a period in the morning and at night, and during the pauses in the day, sitting in silence and stillness and starting to recreate your mind and your body, and beginning to embody the thoughts and the emotions of the person who already has that thing. When you do that, everything will change in your life. Don't do what I did and withhold permission from yourself. Give yourself permission. No one's making you not think awesome thoughts. It's up to you. Guys, I hope this is helpful. This was probably the longest single episode I've ever done. Running a little over half an hour. I usually try to keep these things to 20 minutes, but this is probably the most satisfying, most fulfilling, most powerful work you'll ever do in your life. Create a pocket in the morning, create a pocket at night, right after you wake up, right before you go to bed. And whenever you have a pause during the day, start thinking thoughts, thinking what you want to think, feeling what you want to feel, and your whole life will change.